Hi guys, have a great night. Tonight, we're heading deep into the shadowed forests and sunlit courtyards of the medieval world where a girl's face could be her fortune or her downfall. Imagine standing barefoot in a cool stream, moonlight scattering across the ripples like silver coins. It's quiet, almost too quiet. You rinse the dust from your arms and hair, unaware that just beyond the cattails, a pair of eyes is watching you, wide curious, maybe even a little dangerous. And in this world, you probably won't survive this moment unscarred. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let's take a moment together. Tell me, where are you listening from? Is it night where you are? What's your heart feeling right now? Drop a comment and let's all keep each other company here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge barefoot down the slope, the moss squishing pleasantly beneath your toes. The air smells faintly of mint and iron. Up ahead, a stream winds like a ribbon of glass through the trees. You're 16, maybe younger, old enough to have hips too young to understand what power they hold. You've snuck away again. This is your secret spot. No chaperone, no woven veil. Just moonlight, the sound of frogs, and cool water on your skin. You slip off your linen shift, the hem already damp from walking. It puddles near your ankles. You wade in. It's shockingly cold. You gasp, but stay quiet. You've learned silence is survival. Even now, what you don't know is that someone is watching. Across the stream, half hidden in the underbrush, a boy. No, not a boy. A man. He's your husband's brother. He wasn't supposed to be in this part of the woods tonight, and he certainly wasn't supposed to follow you here. But here he is, eyes wide, breath shallow, watching. Later, when this moment is talked about, and it will be talked about, the story will change. In one version, you invited him. In another, he slipped accidentally stumbling upon you. A third will say you bewitched him with some charm your mother taught you. You just wanted a bath. In medieval times, women like you, especially beautiful ones, could be both revered and reviled. A glowing complexion meant fertility, divine favor, or possibly heresy. Historians still argue whether medieval society's obsession with female beauty was rooted more in religion or property value. Either way, beauty wasn't a blessing. It was a spotlight, and spotlights attract both admiration and accusations. The man shifts. A twig snaps. You freeze. Your arms instinctively cross your chest. You stare into the darkness and whisper, "Who's there?" He steps out slowly, one hand raised in pretend apology. Didn't know anyone was here? He lies. You grab your shift and hold it close, backing toward the bank. The look on his face isn't cruel exactly, but it's hungry, curious, a kind of staring that forgets you're a person, not a prize goat on market day. You climb out of the stream, fingers fumbling to cover yourself. He doesn't turn around. You realize this is part of it. The watching. The not looking away. This is the moment you stop being a girl and start being a story. At home, the household is quiet. Your husband is asleep. He's 27, snores like a broken bellows, and never notices when you're gone. You slip back into the hall with your wet shift clinging to your thighs. Your heart is thudding. You pray no one asks why your hair is wet, but someone will. In a day or two, his brother might say something, or your sister-in-law will drop a too casual remark. It's not modest bathing in the woods alone. You'll be reminded again that beauty belongs to everyone but you. Some girls have their freedom hidden under layers of wool. Others hide in silence. A few are lucky enough to be ignored. You were born with a face that people remember. And in the medieval world, that's not always a compliment. Did you know that during this time, women sometimes covered their faces entirely in public, not for modesty, but for safety? To walk unveiled in certain towns could be considered inviting attention. In others, going veiled meant you were a widow, a nun, or simply dangerous. Some even believed that a woman's uncovered hair could distract a man so deeply he'd forget his prayers and thus doom his soul. Hair. Just hair. In a few more weeks, the staring will get worse, the glances sharper. Your husband's brother will find more reasons to be near. Maybe he'll tell you he loves you, that he'll protect you, that your husband doesn't deserve someone like you. He won't say the truth that in this world, he can take what he wants. And you'll be told to be careful not to lead him on, to stay in your room, to not wash in the stream anymore. Because when something goes wrong, no one ever says, "Why did he follow her?" They say, "Why was she there?" There's one curious fact about medieval justice. While laws existed to protect women, many were conditional on behavior, on status, on timing. For example, a woman could theoretically accuse a man of assault, but only if she had cried out loudly and had witnesses and reported it immediately. No crying, no case. Historians still argue whether these laws were written to protect women or merely to protect the reputations of powerful men. You lie in bed, eyes open. The stream still clings to your skin, drying slowly. You think about burning your shift. You think about never going back. You think about leaving. But where would you go? The fire crackles in the hearth. A beetle clicks along the wooden beam above you. Somewhere outside, an owl screeches. You turn your face to the wall and fall asleep, wishing just this. Once you'd been born ugly. You wake up to the sound of bread being sliced thick, rough strokes through a stale loaf. The cook's already shouting at someone, probably the stable boy, and the scent of ash clings to your hair like a memory you can't shake off. Morning light sneaks in through the cracks in the shutters, golden and soft, but you know better than to trust something just because it looks gentle. Today is market day, which in your case means marriage market day. You're 14 or 15. No one's ever quite sure. There are no birthdays marked on scrolls in this house, only ledgers how much your dowry's worth, how many eggs the hens laid, and how many days left before you must become someone's bride. Your father's been polishing your future like it's a family heirloom. This morning he tells you with a proud grin that Sir Wulfric will be coming to visit. You've never met him, but you've heard the name. He's old, rich. His last wife took sick a year ago. You once saw him spit a lamb bone into a servant's apron. And now you might be his. Downstairs, your mother is fussing with your hair. Don't pout, she hisses. Smile. Just a little. You have pretty teeth. She's tugging the laces of your bodice so tightly you can barely breathe. There's no mirror in the house. You've never really seen yourself, not all at once. Only fragments, reflections in water, glimpses in polished pewter. But they say you're beautiful, and that should be enough. Here's something funny, or maybe tragic, in medieval Europe. The average age of marriage for noble girls was 12 to 14. For peasant girls, it was usually around 17 After all, someone had to milk the cows and make the cheese first. But for beautiful girls of noble blood, the earlier the better. Because beauty fades. Fast. Especially if you're expected to survive childbirth without antibiotics. You're herded like livestock into the great hall where Sir Wulfric is already waiting. His beard is yellowed at the tips from too much wine. He rises slowly, painfully, and kisses your hand like it's a prayer book. You try not to recoil. He smells like boiled onions and something slightly medicinal, like moldy bread wrapped in herbs. The conversation goes on around you like you're not there. They speak about land, daughters, legacies. Your father laughs, claps Wulfric on the back. Your mother brings out the spiced wine. You smile as instructed, and then he says it. She's well formed for her age. Not a compliment? Not really. Just a business assessment, like you're a prized dairy cow with unusually fine ankles. Your father beams. Historians still argue whether medieval families truly believed they were protecting their daughters or just unloading them before they became liabilities. A beautiful girl with no husband was a threat, a temptation, a burden. After all, if she got into trouble, it would stain the whole family. Better to sell the glass vase while it's still intact. You spend the afternoon walking side by side with Sir Wulfric through the orchard. You keep your eyes on the ground. He tells you about his late wife, how she was delicate, how she died in her sleep, how she never gave him any trouble. He strokes your hand like it's an exotic animal. You wonder what her name was. No one's mentioned it. Later, when he leaves, he presses something into your hand. A brooch. Gold with a red stone that's chipped at the corner. For your hair, he says. Then he grins and adds, soon we'll find other things to decorate. You wash your hands twice that night. The brooch stays under your pillow. You can't decide if it's a gift or a collar. At supper, your father is glowing. He's drinking the good wine. He tells your brothers that Wulfric's not bad for a first match, and that once the old man dies, she'll be a very eligible widow. As if widowhood is the prize, as if your womb is a chess piece, and the game hasn't even started yet. One little known fact: in certain medieval cultures, a beautiful woman could actually command a lower dowry than her plain counterpart. Why? Because her looks were considered added value. A rich, unattractive bride needed wealth to compensate. A pretty one, she was the wealth. Outside the moon is rising again. You slip out into the dark and sit by the stream, not to bathe, just to sit. The breeze makes your hair dance across your face. You think about cutting it all off. But hair is valuable too. You run your fingers through it, pull it back into a knot. You want to look older, less appealing. But it won't matter. Your beauty doesn't belong to you. Not anymore. You wonder, for the first time, if you could run. If there's a place where a girl like you could be something more than her face. But then, you think about the roads, about bandits, about wolves. Did you know that in some parts of medieval France, young runaway girls were labeled vagrants and imprisoned not because they committed a crime, but because they defied their assigned fate? A girl who refused marriage could be sent to a convent, or worse, returned to her father with a fine attached for his inconvenience. You sigh and toss a stone into the water. It skips once, twice, then sinks. Tomorrow, they'll announce the engagement. The brooch will be pinned to your veil. Your father will toast your bright future, and you'll smile again. Because what else can you do? You lie back on the moss, eyes open, listening to the stream. You wonder if Sir Wulfric will let you keep your dog, if he'll make you sleep beside him every night, if you'll have a daughter, if she'll look like you. You hope not. The walls of the convent are thick, so thick you could scream, and no one would hear you. That's the first thing you notice. The second is how cold the air is, even in midsummer. It curls through the narrow stone corridors, like an invisible cat always brushing at your ankles. You weren't supposed to come here forever. This was just supposed to be for your education. A few months to polish your manners, soften your voice, learn to stitch letters into linen napkins, and conjugate Latin phrases that sound holier than they feel. But days have passed, then weeks, now months, and no one's come to take you home. You're 16. You've memorized the Psalms. You can sing in harmony with the choir, and you're very good at embroidering roses. But you haven't seen your mother's face in 71 days. It's not punishment exactly. You're not a prisoner, but you're also not free. In the mornings, you rise before dawn and wash with icy water from a chipped basin. You chant in the chapel until your knees ache. Then you spend hours copying scripture or sorting herbs. In theory, it's peaceful. But peace wears a thin disguise when it starts to feel like silence. You've heard stories about girls like you sent to convents because they were too pretty, too willful, too much trouble. Some were intended to return to court polished and pure. Others never made it out at all. Did you know some noble families donated their daughters to convents to avoid paying dowries? It was cheaper to buy a lifetime of devotion than to marry off a difficult girl. Historians still argue whether these choices were acts of strategy or quiet cruelty. The abbess likes you. That's not always a good thing. She says you have a graceful voice and a face fit for the altar. At first, it feels flattering, but then she starts asking you to stay after choir. She watches you closely when you clean the sacred vessels. She gives you extra duties, ones that keep you away from the other girls. The other novices don't speak much, but they watch. You're not the first beautiful girl in this place. One was sent home suddenly last year, after someone saw a bishop lingering too long by her pew. Another fell ill and was never seen again. No one talks about them, but their names are still scratched into the underside of a wooden bench near the scriptorium. You found them by accident running your fingers across the grain. Every now and then, a priest visits, always robed, always solemn. They glide down the halls like ghosts' mouths pressed into lines of disapproval, but they smile at you. They always smile at you. You're warned by a quiet girl with crooked teeth and kindness in her eyes not to smile back. They remember that she whispers. Smiles make them think things. There are two kinds of girls in the convent, the forgettable and the unforgettable. One is safer. You, unfortunately, are not her. One night during Vespers, you feel eyes on you. You look up and see the visiting priest watching from the back pew. His head tilted, his lips twitching into something between a grin and a frown. After prayers, he asks the abbess to assign someone to show him the herbarium. The abbess sends you. You walk ahead. He walks behind. His footsteps echo off the stone like slow drums. In the herb room, he leans in close, points to the valerian root and says, "That one helps with sleep, for girls who dream too much." Then he brushes your hair back from your cheek. You flinch. Step away. Knock a jar of dried sage to the floor. He laughs, says nothing. Leaves. You sweep up the pieces with trembling hands. That night you can't sleep. Your room is tiny, cell-like. A narrow bed, a small cross, a single candle stub. You lie awake, counting the cracks in the ceiling. You wonder if anyone would believe you if you spoke. Some convents you've heard were like sanctuaries. Others were more like storage closets for inconvenient daughters. Yours sits somewhere between a place where prayers cover sins, like dust over cobwebs. There's a book hidden beneath the choir robes in the laundry room, a tattered thing with a worn leather cover. No one claims it, but someone left a pressed violet inside the pages. You read it when no one's looking. It's full of stories saints who glowed with holy fire martyrs, who sang while burning women, who refused to bow to kings or cardinals. You envy them. But you also know if you tried that they'd call it madness, not holiness. Because history remembers stubborn men as brave and stubborn women as witches. One strange, almost silly fact, some nuns believed a woman's tears were spiritually purifying evidence of divine contact. So if you wept after being shamed or touched or frightened, they might simply say, God is close to her. That night you cry. The next morning you decide. You pack nothing. You wait until the bells ring for matins. You slip into the shadows behind the candlemaker's room. You leave through the side gate barefoot. The gate creaks, but no one calls out. The air outside tastes like freedom and frost. You're not sure where you'll go, only that it will be away. Away from prayers whispered like threats. Away from the smile of that priest. Away from your own reflection, which you've grown to fear. You run until your lungs burn. You've escaped. But freedom always has a price. You arrive at the manor in a cart full of onions. Not glamorous, no, but it gets you past the gates without too many questions. The steward assumes you're a new kitchen girl. He's too busy yelling about goose livers to care where you came from, or why your hair is tangled with bramble thorns. You nod curtsy and disappear into the corridors of a life that isn't yours. Congratulations. You're now a servant in House Belroy's, one of the wealthier noble homes on this side of the river. It's a sprawling, drafty place with too many windows and not enough warmth. But it's not a convent. And that's enough. You're given a pallet in the scullery, a bucket of water, and a chipped comb. They tell you to smile when addressed, speak only when spoken to, and keep your hair tied back. You're told you're lucky to be here. You believe them. At first. Then you notice the way some men look at you. You're 17, maybe 18, old enough now to know that being beautiful is like walking through a dry forest holding a candle. Some people just want to get close. Others want to see what burns. You do everything right. You keep your head down. You scrub dishes until your knuckles split. You starch linens. You clean chamber pots. And yet still, you catch the eye of Lord Belroy's cousin, Sir Alec. He's not old, not ugly, just watchful, polished. He tells you your name doesn't suit your face. He asks if anyone's claimed you. You say no, because what else is there to say? He begins appearing more often, in the hallways, at the well, near the laundry. He speaks softly, always with a grin that never reaches his eyes. One afternoon, he accidentally brushes your shoulder in the garden. You freeze. He laughs and says, "Pretty girls always flinch like that. Makes it more fun." You laugh too, because you have to. You're not a guest here. You're replaceable. Historians still debate how much protection female servants had in noble households. Officially, lords were expected to maintain honor among their staff. Unofficially, if you were pretty and young and alone, well, no one asked too many questions. Some manor houses even had hidden side rooms, built specifically so nobles could visit favored maids without scandal. Your chamber is next to the laundry. One door. No lock. You start sleeping with a knife under your straw mattress. It's dull. Better for peeling apples than for protection. But it gives you something to hold. One morning, Lady Belroys calls you to her chamber. She stares at you for a long time. Her dress is crimson, her expression unreadable. Then, with a tone like someone discussing mildew, she says, "You're distracting him." You nod slowly. She leans forward. "Don't be a distraction." In other words, if something happens, it will be your fault. There's a strange fact recorded in the diary of a 14th century noblewoman. She once dismissed her prettiest maid, not because of disobedience, but because her husband lingered too long over the soup she served. The girl's crime was having eyelashes that curled naturally. You start wearing soot around your eyes to make them look smaller. You smear your face with lard and ash when working in the kitchen. You keep your hair damp and tangled. You learn how to shrink. But shrinking only works so long. Sir Alec finds you one evening in the stable. You're brushing down a horse, trying to forget everything. He startles you, takes the brush from your hand, and begins talking about horses, about wine, about how he's tired of noble girls with cold hands and expensive perfume. You pretend to listen. You look at the hay, the door, the space between you. Then he steps closer. You back up. He stops, watches you like a curious cat, and then thankfully walks away. That time, the next day, you ask the steward to assign you to the kitchen permanently. He shrugs, mutters something about lazy girls and broken dishes, and agrees. The kitchen is loud hot and filled with shouting. It's perfect. There's one older cook, Marta, who sees through your silence. One evening she presses a coin into your hand and says, "Just in case." You nod. You don't ask what case she means. In medieval households, alliances among servants were critical. Some older women acted as unofficial guardians to younger maids, warning them about which corridors to avoid, which men were safe, and which were poison in silk doublets. You learn the dance. You survive. You survive for 2 seasons. Then Lady Belroys falls ill. Everything changes. Sir Alec is suddenly in charge. He starts calling you Nightingale. You avoid him. He corners you during linen delivery. You refuse to meet his eyes. So he makes your life harder. You're reassigned to his wing of the house. You bring him wine, towels, fresh socks, always alone, always in silence, until the night he touches your wrist. You don't sleep. You lie on your straw mattress knife clutched in both hands. You remember the stream, the convent, the prayer book with its torn violet. You whisper to the ceiling, "Not again. Not this time." The next morning, you're gone. You take nothing but Marta's coin, your knife, and a stale roll from the pantry. You leave before sunrise, your breath blooming in the frost like a ghost. You disappear. Again. Because being beautiful in a noble house, it's not a blessing. It's a storm cloud. You walk for 3 days. Your feet blister. Then the blisters break. Then they bleed. You wrap them in scraps of your apron, tie them with string, and keep moving. You sleep under trees curled up like a squirrel. You eat berries, You drink from puddles. You avoid roads. Roads have riders. You don't have a name anymore, not one that matters. You're just a girl with pretty eyes, ragged clothes, and too much silence in her bones. On the fourth day, you find a village. It's small, just a scatter of cottages around a crumbling chapel and a sheep pen. You try to slip through unnoticed, but a woman hauling water spots you. She calls to someone inside. Then she looks at you again, eyes narrowing. She's not smiling. You keep your head down. You ask for bread. You offer to sweep. You lie and say you're a widow. Married young husband died of fever. The story feels thin like thread that will snap under tugging. But it works. For now. They let you stay in the barn. You sweep, scrub, churn, patch roofs, tend goats. You hide your hair under a scarf. You wear soot on your cheeks. You keep your eyes low. It works, mostly, until it doesn't. Because beauty, it doesn't need good lighting or fine dresses. Sometimes it slips through even your best disguises, like sun through shutters, like scent on wind. At first, it's just the way the older women watch you, the whispered prayers said when you pass, the old man who refuses to let you milk his cow anymore. Then, one morning, you find a handful of rosemary twigs nailed to your door. A warning. Rosemary isn't for seasoning, not here. It's for protection, or for warding something off. The baker's wife says, "That girl's too clean for someone with no home." The blacksmith's daughter says she talks to animals like a witch. One child claims they saw you heal a bird with your breath. You didn't. You just picked it up and cried when it died. But facts don't matter here. Historians still argue whether medieval witchcraft accusations were truly about religion, or if they were just convenient excuses to punish women who were strange, beautiful, defiant, or unlucky. Often, all at once. You start keeping to yourself even more. But isolation feeds the gossip. And then it happens. One evening, just before dusk, a man stumbles into the village square bleeding from his forehead. He claims he was attacked in the woods by a spirit with eyes like fire. You don't think he even sees you sitting by the well. But by morning, half the village is whispering that you were seen in the trees. Not screaming, just watching. You try to leave quietly, but the elder calls a meeting before sunrise. You're brought before them. Your hands tremble. You try to explain, to plead, to say you're just a girl, just tired, just hungry. But it doesn't matter what you say. You're too young, too clean, too pretty. One old woman mutters, "She don't age like the rest of us." Another says, "Saw her with a blackbird on her shoulder, just sitting there like it knew her." You want to laugh. You want to scream. You want to vanish. Instead, you're told to leave by sundown. You're lucky, they say. They could have done worse, could have tied you to a chair, dunked you in the river to see if you float, could have shaved your head and branded your cheek with a hot iron, could have tossed you in the stocks. One curious fact in parts of medieval England, beauty itself could be used as evidence of sorcery. A woman too lovely, too composed, too still, was often seen as unnatural. Some trial records describe a suspect's face before any testimony. One even opens with her beauty, struck the crowd dumb as if it were not born of woman. You leave. Again. You don't cry this time. You're tired of crying. You walk back into the woods. It's almost dark. You find a clearing with a thick tree stump. You sit. For the first time in months, you scream. Not loud, just enough to feel it scratch your throat. You sleep in the hollow beneath the roots of a gnarled old elm. It smells of rot and mushrooms, but it's yours. The next day, you find another village. You walk past it. The next day, another. By the third, your stomach aches so badly it feels like your spine is folding. You stop at a roadside shrine. A wooden Madonna watches you with cracked eyes and a chipped mouth. You kneel and murmur something that might be a prayer. Not for safety, just for one day without suspicion. That night, you dream of water, of the stream from years ago, of ripples catching the moonlight, of the moment you were still innocent. And you remember even then someone was watching. You make it to a town. Not a manor, not a village, an actual town. With walls, a proper market square, and enough people that no one notices your face for a while. You blend in among the bakers' wives, fishmongers, coopers, and crying children. You wear a wool cloak that smells like a wet dog. It helps. You find work as a washerwoman's assistant. It's miserable. Your hands crack from the cold water. Your back aches from hauling linen. But it pays a few coins, and the older women don't ask questions, too busy with their own ruined knees and gossip about butcher prices. You rent half a room above a candlemaker's shop. The other half belongs to a girl named Els. She snores, talks in her sleep, but she shares her porridge and doesn't try to borrow your boots. That's more kindness than you've had in months. You begin to breathe again until he arrives. A night. You first see him in the market, leaning against a cart like he owns the cobblestones, chainmail glinting under his open surcoat, a feather pinned to his shoulder, and eyes that sweep the crowd like a hawk. And when they land on you, you feel it. That old familiar cold. He doesn't say anything. Not yet. But over the next few days, he keeps appearing. In the bakery queue. At the well. Once outside the bathhouse where he says, "You're not from here, are you?" You mumble something about working for the washerwoman. He smiles. Such hands shouldn't be wasted on laundry. You try to laugh. He offers you honeyed almonds wrapped in cloth. You decline. But the next evening, there's a bundle left outside your door. You don't touch it. One of the washerwomen, an old widow with arms like tree branches, warns you. "He's a lord's son," she says. "He does what he likes." You ask what likes means. She spits in the fire and says, "You'll know when he stops asking." And that's the thing. In medieval towns, knights weren't always noble heroes. Many were landless sons trained to fight, but bored between wars. They wandered into towns, flashing status like a dagger in daylight, looking for wine fights, or girls who couldn't say no. Historians still argue whether the concept of chivalry was ever meant to protect women, or if it was just pageantry to distract from the bruises. You try to stay indoors, but coin is coin, and laundry doesn't fold itself. You keep your eyes low, your scarf tighter. You wait. Then comes the evening market, bustling with travelers and song. You're elbow deep in suds when you hear it, a sharp whistle. You turn. The knight is there holding a pear. He grins like you're a tavern joke. You go back to your washing. Later, you find a chicken bone wedged into the crease of your windowsill. It's carved into the shape of a heart. That's when you know he's decided he wants you. And wanting in his case usually leads to taking. You tell Els. She frowns, then says run. You say again. She nods. Or marry him. You both laugh. It's bitter. One odd tidbit from the period in some towns, a knight could petition for a peasant woman's hand, or more often her company, and the town officials wouldn't interfere if a gift was made to the guild. It was an unspoken transaction. Bread butter and silence. You don't want silence anymore. So you do something dangerous. You go to the local priest. He's young, nervous, talks like he's never been alone in a room with a woman before. But he listens. You tell him you're afraid, that a knight is watching you, that you need a place to hide. He offers the church cellar. It smells like wet straw and melted wax. But it's safe. For now. You stay there for 2 nights. The knight doesn't see you again. But rumors bloom. She's hiding something. She's proud. She's cursed. One woman claims your hair doesn't frizz in the rain. Another says she saw your reflection in the well blink after you walked away. You think, here we go again. A traveling merchant hears the talk and says you remind him of a noblewoman burned in a nearby town. He can't remember why she was burned, just that she was too beautiful. He means it as a compliment. You sleep with a candle burning now, not because of him, but because of what beauty invites, again and again, like a trap with velvet lining. The priest tells you gently that it might be safer if you left soon. Before people get ideas, you pack your sack, again, and before you go, Els hugs you. You should try to look different. You smile. Ugly, you mean. She nods. Safe. You cut your hair, tie it back with string, smudge soot under your eyes. But you know it won't be enough, because even when you're quiet, careful, modest, someone always notices. You step onto the road as bells chime midnight, and once again, you disappear. The forest path is muddy and silent, broken only by the occasional crack of a twig under your foot or the distant hoot of an owl. You're walking with no destination, just away from the night's gaze, the murmured rumors, the carved chicken bone left like a curse on your windowsill. You've been on the road for 2 days now, and your pack is lighter than ever. A half loaf of bread, a rusted needle, a length of string. The knife, of course, the same dull blade you've kept since the manor days, now worn smooth with your thumbprint. You've thought of tossing it, but it feels like the one part of your story you still chose to carry. Around midday, you reach a clearing where a man is sitting by a fire. He's lean, with a scraggly beard and a coin-shaped scar on his chin. He looks up and nods. You heading to Branton. You shake your head. You're not heading to anything. Too bad, he says. They're hiring girls for the mill. Ugly ones get picked first, though. Less trouble. He grins like he's made a clever joke. You force a smile, then move on. He doesn't follow. You sleep that night in a hollow between 2 trees. Your stomach growls, but your body's learned not to complain too loudly anymore. Hunger is familiar now, like an old cat curled up at the foot of your bed. In the morning, your path crosses with a group of pilgrims. They're bound for a shrine, said to house the toe of St. Eustace. One of them, a kindly woman with crooked teeth, offers you a chunk of oatcake and a place in their line. You accept, you blend. For 3 days, you walk among them, listening to stories about miracles, lost sons, healed goiters, and goats that learn to kneel during prayer. You nod, smile, speak little. But even here among the faithful, it happens. One of the younger men, Thomas, begins walking too close, asking questions. Where's your husband? You sure you've not taken vows? You got a face that looks kissed by light. He's not cruel, just persistent, always asking, always staring. And then one night by the campfire, you wake to find him kneeling beside your blanket. You don't scream. You just look at him. Your eyes say everything your lips don't. He stumbles back, muttering an apology. The next morning, he avoids you. But others have noticed. Whispered something. Wondered why you didn't cry out. Because in this world, if a beautiful woman doesn't scream, it must mean she welcomed it. Right. There's an old belief, especially strong in parts of medieval Germany, that a woman who remains silent in the face of male attention is either enchanted or enchanting. Either way, dangerous. Historians still debate whether this myth came from superstition or guilt. Likely both. On the fourth day, you leave the pilgrims. You say nothing, just disappear into the trees while they sleep. Again. You reach a village by sunset. Your boots are falling apart. Your cloak smells like wet wool and desperation. But you're still pretty. That's the problem. You trade your brooch, the chipped one from Wulfric, for a night's rest in the hayloft. The woman who owns the barn eyes you the whole time, says nothing, until morning. Then she says, "Don't come back." You want to ask why, but you already know. There's something about beauty people don't talk about. Not just jealousy, not just desire. Fear. Fear that you'll bring change. Fear that you'll draw attention. Fear that men will do bad things and that you'll be the reason. One strange story you remember hearing from a merchant girl in a certain village. They banned mirrors in public because women spent too long admiring what turned men mad. Whether true or not, it sounds familiar. You keep moving. Eventually you come to a river too deep to ford. There's a ferryman old and bent like a crooked root. He squints at you, then points with his chin. No coin, no crossing. You nod. Dig in your pouch. Marta's coin is still there. You hesitate. It's all you have left. You give it to him. The boat rocks as you climb in. The river is black, wide, slow-moving. You don't speak. Neither does he. Halfway across, he says, "Pretty face like yours don't last long on the road." You nod. He chuckles. Some say that's a blessing. Others say it's a curse. You look at the water and whisper, "Both." When you reach the far bank, you step out onto the mud. The coin's gone. The ferryman's already pushing off again. You're on a new side, a new road, a new chance maybe. But you still carry the same face. And in this world, that's enough to start the same story over. You walk until your legs feel like driftwood, numb and hollow, like they belong to someone else. Days pass in a dream of dirt paths and mossy stones. You sleep in sheds under bridges beside hedges buzzing with bees. You begin to speak less, smile even less than that. Then one gray afternoon you see it rising on the horizon like the crown of a stone queen, a great church, massive, cold, and still under construction. Wooden scaffolds wrap around it like a rib cage. Dozens of men chip at the stone with mallets carving saints and beasts with bleeding knuckles. You stare not at the church, but at the life surrounding it tense. Smoke, voices, smells. A makeshift town of workers and widows, masons and orphans. A place full of people so busy they might not notice one more. You're welcomed, sort of. A woman named Bernice, who limps from a crushed ankle, lets you share her cook fire in exchange for hauling water. You learn the rhythm of this place. Early starts bitter bread, constant hammering. No questions, no sermons. No one cares about your past, which is perfect, at least until the priest arrives. He's younger than most. Clean robes, warm smile, hands that haven't known real labor in years. He speaks softly, offering blessing to the workers, asking them to confess, reminding them that pain is a test and beauty is a temptation. That last bit, it's meant for you. At first he's subtle, asking your name, complimenting your humility, offering little gifts like dates wrapped in cloth or a ribbon you never asked for. You return the gifts, of course. You know this game. But he plays it slowly, patiently. Then, one evening, while you're scrubbing pots by the fire, he kneels beside you, says he's concerned, that you seem troubled, that he can help you, if you let him. You thank him and walk away. The next day you're called to his tent. He sits you down and opens a book of Psalms, reads one aloud softly, almost lovingly, about women being vessels of grace and obedience. Then he closes the book, looks you in the eye and says, "Beauty is a burden, one you can't carry alone." You know what he means. You leave. But not quickly enough. By morning, the whispers start. She's turning his head. She distracts him from prayer. She walks like she knows men look. You tighten your cloak. You stop attending Mass. You avoid his gaze, which only makes it worse, because a woman who hides must be hiding something. One of the Masons, a man named Folk, defends you, says he saw you refuse the priest, says you keep to yourself. A good man, that Folk. 2 days later, he falls from the scaffold. Some say he slipped. Others aren't so sure. You think about running. Again. But you're tired. Your feet are cracked, your ribs sharp. You've spent too many nights curling under bushes like an animal. You can't keep fleeing the world just for looking the way you do, so you try something different. You confront him. You walk into his tent and stand tall. He flinches just slightly when he sees you. "I'm not your burden," you say. He blinks. "I'm not your sin. I'm not your test. I'm not your excuse." He says nothing. His face stiffens. His eyes harden. By sunset, you've been dismissed from the workers' camp. No trial, no hearing. Just a short word from the priest to the overseer. She's become a distraction. That's all it takes. And here's the thing, medieval priests weren't just spiritual guides. They were landlords, advisors, tax collectors, confessors. A priest could raise you up or erase you. And historians still argue whether the medieval church feared women's beauty as a temptation or envied it as power. You leave that night, not because you're afraid, but because you're done letting anyone else define what you are. You cross a river barefoot. It's freezing. The current nearly sweeps you away, but you cling to the rocks and drag yourself out the other side soaked and shivering. You make a fire, your first fire. You build it badly. Smoke chokes your lungs and your bread burns. But still, you did it. The next morning, you cut your hair again. Short this time. Uneven. It curls strangely around your face. You look at your reflection in the water. You don't see a witch, or a seductress, or a saint. You just see a girl. Tired. Alive. Beautiful, maybe. But more than that, yours. Your own. You whisper, "No more running." And for the first time, the words don't feel like hope. They feel like truth. You find shelter in a thatcher's village. It's barely more than 5 homes clustered around a hollow tree and a muddy path, but the people are kind, or at least indifferent, which is better than most. You tell them your name is Magda. It's not, but it's simple and forgettable, and that's what you want now. You offer to help with repairs, carry hay, feed pigs, clean pans. You don't mention prayer or saints or anything noble. No one asks who your father was or how your hands got so cracked. The thatcher's wife, Mila, is heavy-limbed and sharp-eyed. She lets you sleep beside the hearth. You stay. For a while. One afternoon, you help Mila gather herbs in the wood yarrow elderflower nettle. Mila watches you work and says, "You know plants well." You nod. "You've learned some mostly to stop bleeding or to keep fever down." She squints at you. "Did your mother teach you?" You hesitate. "No." Mila shrugs. "Mine did. Her mother too." Later, over stew, she asks if you want to learn more. You say yes. Over the next weeks, you begin gathering with her regularly. She shows you what leaves to dry, what roots to boil, how to make ointment for cracked skin, and oils to ease coughs. You're careful not to ask too many questions. You listen, you absorb, you become useful. And for the first time in what feels like years, you feel safe. Then one evening, a girl in the village burns herself on the hearth. You grind elder bark and smear it across the blister. By morning, her hand is smooth again. People murmur, praise, smile. 2 days later, a man twists his ankle. You wrap it off her willow bark for pain. He walks without a limp a week later. The whispers start again. This time, they're not cruel. Not yet. They call you healer. They call you blessed. One child even calls you magic lady. You want to laugh, or cry, or both. Because you know how this ends. There's a reason medieval women who knew herbs lived in the shadow of firewood. Healing was a holy art, until it wasn't. Midwives and herb women were tolerated, even respected, until someone died, or crops failed, or a baby was born wrong. Then the fingers pointed. Then the flames rose. Historians still debate whether the so-called witch hunts were about religion, medicine, or just fear of female autonomy. Still, for now, you're safe. And even the sky seems to know its soft gray clouds linger overhead, warm breezes rustle the leaves. No one stares at your face with hunger. No one leaves bones at your door. Just a steady rhythm of chopping, brewing, sleeping. One morning, you wake to a soft scratching at the door. It's a stranger. A girl, maybe 13. Thin, pale, clutching her stomach like something's eating her from the inside. "I was told you help," she says. You nod. You bring her inside. Boil water. Give her ginger and mint. She sobs when the pain subsides. You learn her name is Ro. She stays 3 days. On the 4th, her father arrives. He's angry, all teeth and spit. He barges into the hut, demanding to know what you did to his daughter. She was dying, you say. She isn't now. He stares at you for a long moment. Then he spits on the floor and leaves. You tell Mila. She frowns. Fools fear what they don't understand. That night you can't sleep. You lie awake, staring at the rafters, listening to the fire pop. You remember the brooch, the night's almonds, the priest's smile, the rosemary nailed to your door. Always it comes back around. In the morning, Ro's father tells others, not just about your herbs, but your eyes, your voice, the way you speak, like someone born in a castle. And you know what's next. It takes only 3 days for the shift to happen. The girl you saved. She won't look at you. The man with the twisted ankle avoids your path. Even Mila seems slower to smile. Then, someone leaves a dead crow on your doorstep. You stare at it for a long time. You don't scream. You bury it under the tree. That night, you decide. You can't stay. Not because you did wrong, but because eventually, someone will need someone to blame. And a beautiful girl who knows how to stop bleeding. That's a recipe for fire. So you pack. You hug Mila. She doesn't hug you back, just nods tight-lipped. You leave before dawn. You don't cry. You don't run. You just walk. Again. But something's different this time. Because now you're not trying to disappear. You're looking for something. A place where women don't have to trade silence for safety. A place where you don't have to apologize for the face you were born with. A place where your hands can heal without fear of being accused of magic. If such a place exists. If not, you'll make one. The road stretches on like an old song you've half forgotten. Trees blur into hedges, hedges into open fields, and the fields give way to long, flat miles where you see your shadow more often than you see another soul. You keep walking, not fast, not slow, just enough to keep moving. You find a ruined chapel tucked between two hills, its roof half gone, and birds nesting in what was once the bell tower. You sleep there. You light no fire. You eat dried roots and cold oats. You sing to yourself softly, barely above a whisper. You're not sure why. Maybe just to prove you still have a voice. And then one morning, your luck or something like it changes. You hear hoofbeats on the path. You press yourself behind a stone wall, heart pounding. You've had enough of nights, enough of horses, enough of being noticed. But it's not a night. It's a woman. She rides alone, tall in the saddle. Her cloak is blue, edged with stitching. You recognize as noble work. But her hair is loose, her eyes sharp, and she's smiling not at you, not at anyone, just smiling, like she owns the path. She sees you, slows. You step out from the wall, slowly hands, visible wary. She tilts her head. You're not from here. Neither is she. That much is clear. You nod. You runnin'. You don't answer. She swings off the horse and offers you an apple. You take it. She says her name is Anselma, says she's headed north, says she doesn't ask questions unless there's reason to. And then, you look like someone who's had enough of men's ideas about what beauty means. You nearly drop the apple. She laughs. It's low, dry, like old paper catching fire. You travel with her. At first, you keep your distance, but she doesn't press. She shows you how to use a sling to hunt birds, how to identify safe mushrooms, how to tighten your boots so the leather doesn't blister your heels. She sleeps with a knife under her pillow and teaches you to do the same. One night, around the fire, she tells you her story. She was married at 13. Her husband beat her, called her cursed when their first child was stillborn. The priest said it was because she dressed like a harlot on her wedding night. When her second child died in the womb, they called her womb witch-touched. She ran. That was 15 years ago. Since then, she's crossed mountains, worked in vineyards, fought off a bear, fought off worse. You ask her if she regrets it. She shrugs. No one's hunted me in years. That's something. She teaches you more. How to sharpen a blade, how to fake a limp to appear less threatening, how to barter like a widow who's buried 4 husbands and plans to outlive 5 more. You ask her if she's ever been caught. She grins. Once. But I talked my way out of it. You laugh. A real laugh. The first in who knows how long. You travel together for weeks. You're no longer hiding your face. You wear it like weather. Some people look, some don't. You stop caring. But then you reach a town. It's large, loud, walls of timber and stone, market stalls shouting with spices and wool and figs soaked in honey. You and Anselma slip in unnoticed. She finds a contact, a friend of a friend, she says, who lets you stay in a cellar room behind a cheese shop. It smells awful, but the blankets are clean and the door locks. You sleep for 14 hours straight. When you wake, you realize something. No one knows your name here. No one knows what you are. You could be a widow, a merchant's daughter, a nun gone wayward. You could be anyone. You spend days working in the shop, wrapping cheese in leaves, stirring milk in heavy copper pots. The shopkeeper barely speaks. He likes women who keep to themselves. Perfect. Until, of course, it happens again. One morning, a noblewoman comes into the shop. Her veil is gold-threaded, her boots spotless. Her eyes glance across the room, land on you, and linger. "You," she says, "do you sew?" You hesitate. The shopkeeper answers, "She's quick with thread. You're hired before you can argue." Turns out the lady is assembling a bridal trousseau. She needs seamstresses. You apparently look the part. You're escorted to the manor on the edge of town. It's nothing like the grand halls of your past. It's cluttered, faded, lived in. The lady is sharp-tongued but fair. You stitch lace, hem sleeves, mute, useful. But the lady has a son. Of course she does. He's not cruel, just curious. He watches you, asks your name, asks if you're married, says you have a quiet way about you, like someone with secrets. You ignore him. You sew. You count the days, because it always comes back to this. The boy and his fascination. The mother and her suspicion. You ask to leave. The lady says, "No one walks out of my house in the middle of a commission." You pack anyway. You leave through the kitchen door at dawn. Again. You find Anselma waiting at the river. She doesn't ask what happened. Just hands you a boiled egg and says, "We're better on the road, you and me." You nod, because you're starting to believe it. Because beauty doesn't fade. But maybe, just maybe it can stop being chased. If you run fast enough, the air changes the farther north you go. It smells of pine, of wet stone, of the sharp bite that warns of winter, even in summer. You travel with Anselma for weeks, moving through wooded paths and over wind-swept fields where no one knows you and no one stares. And for the first time, you begin to wonder, what would life look like if you stopped surviving it and actually lived it? You find a village that doesn't feel like danger. Not at first. It's small, quiet, built around a crumbling abbey and a muddy square where the only sound is chickens scratching in the dirt. Anselma says, "We could stay." You wait for the familiar chill, the dread that always settles in your bones, the moment you hear the word, "stay," but it doesn't come. You nod. The villagers are cautious but not unkind. They need hands for spinning flax, patching walls, tending the sick. You offer yours. Anselma does too. She fixes a broken cartwheel like she's been doing it for decades. She probably has. You're given a room in an old stone barn near a family who mostly keeps to themselves. A little girl leaves you a turnip wrapped in cloth. You don't know why. You thank her anyway. You sleep deeply. You dream of nothing. And when you wake, you begin again. You settle into rhythm laundry by the stream, baking in shared ovens, helping with poultices when fevers rise. You wear your hair tied back, not hidden. You wear simple wool, but not in rags. And when people look at you, they don't look through you. They don't try to own you. Not for a while. Then one morning, someone leaves flowers on your doorstep. Wild roses. You freeze. It's not a threat. Not exactly. But it is a reminder that no matter how quietly you live, someone will eventually call it mysterious. And mysterious for a beautiful woman is one syllable away from dangerous. You don't know who left them. You don't want to. You ignore them. You sweep them into the hearth. You don't speak of it, but Anselma sees the ash and says, "They're starting again." You nod. There's a man in the village, Jonas. He has kind eyes and a missing thumb. He carves spoons and feeds stray dogs. He doesn't stare. He asks once if you want help lifting a basket. You say no. He nods. He never asks again. He makes you feel almost normal. Almost. But the village priest, he watches. He watched you from the first moment you arrived, not leering, just assessing, as if trying to decide what kind of woman you are. He preaches about temptation now, more than he did before. About Eve, about Delilah, about the dangers of unguarded women and the power of appearance. He never says your name. He doesn't have to. And here's the curious thing. In many medieval towns, beauty was more than a physical trait. It was treated like a social disruptor. A beautiful woman could be the reason a man failed at his work, lost a crop, or sinned in the eyes of God. And who paid for that? Not the man. Never the man. You feel the shift. The baker's wife stops chatting with you. Children no longer run to greet you. One evening, your loaf of bread is mysteriously missing from the communal table. You say nothing. But Anselma does. She corners the priest after Mass. You don't hear the words. You just hear her tone, low and lethal, like a blade being drawn from oilcloth. He doesn't speak of Eve again. The next week, a girl in the village falls sick. Fever, sweats, too weak to rise. No one knows what to do. Anselma tells them you do. You want to say no. You want to run. But you go. You mix yarrow and mint, cool the girl's skin with water, stay with her through the night. She lives. People say thank you. They smile again. But it's a different kind of smile now. Too wide, too wary. You know that smile. You've seen it in every town you've left behind. You don't sleep that night. You sit outside the barn listening to the forest breathe. Anselma joins. You drops a blanket over your shoulders. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. Because both of you know it doesn't matter how careful you are, how helpful, how quiet. Eventually, someone will ask the question, why her? And someone else will answer it with a story. She must be a saint, or she must be a seductress, or if they're feeling particularly clever, both. Historians still argue whether women were ever allowed to be simply people in medieval society. The records speak of miracles and monsters, of angels and witches. But they rarely mention the quiet in between. The woman who healed a child and went home to sweep her floor. The woman who said no and was believed. Maybe those stories were never written down. Or maybe no one thought they were worth telling. But you do. You're still here. Still walking. Still not what they want you to be. And that, somehow, is the most dangerous thing of all. You leave the village just before the frost comes. No fire, no pitchforks this time. No trial. No accusations screamed into a square. Just the slow, creeping chill of polite suspicion. A loaf missing from your basket. A child forbidden from holding your hand. Eyes no longer meeting yours. You could stay. Pretend you don't feel it. Pretend you don't see the frost forming not just on the ground, but in their hearts. But you've played that game too many times, so you leave before they decide to punish you for the unease you never meant to cause. Anselma hugs you at the edge of the forest. She presses a bundle into your hands, dried herbs, a bone needle flint wrapped in wool. She says, I'll stay. They're not afraid of me. You smile. Yet. She grins, but the sadness is there. You both know if they ever need someone to blame, it won't matter how many spoons Jonas carves, how many children get well. They'll still look for a witch when the cow's milk turns sour. You walk north, alone again. You pass into thinner air past tall pines and frozen earth, where even birds seem to hold their breath. You sleep beneath ledges in old shepherd huts under branches heavy with frost. You start keeping a tally on your wrist, scratched faintly with a thorn. Not for the days you've traveled, but for the places you were not chased. It's a short tally, and then on a morning where the sky is so pale it looks hollow, you find a monastery. Not a grand one, just a crumbling outpost of stone tucked against the cliffside like a secret. You approach carefully. Inside, a woman opens the door. Not a nun, just someone older with a face full of lines carved not by age but by weather. Her name is Isabetta. She looks you over and says, "Hungry?" You nod. She feeds you lentil stew. Thick, bland, perfect. You stay the night. By the second day, she asks no questions. By the third, she puts a broom in your hand, and that's it. No sermons, no veils, no leering priests or boys with too much curiosity, just quiet. You learn the rhythm of the place, bread at dawn, silence before dusk prayers if you want them, not mandatory, not weaponized, and slowly your breath deepens. There are 3 other women here, all older, none married, none talking about their past. You recognize their eyes. One stokes the fire with the kind of fury that can only come from years of being interrupted. Another keeps bees and hums lullabies that don't have words. The last one teaches you to read. Better really read. Not just prayers or copied scriptures, but stories. Strange ones, pagan myths, tales of women who turned into trees to avoid kings, girls who laughed at death, wives who fled weddings and grew wings. You read one about a queen who turned herself into a wolf to escape her husband. You laugh so hard, you choke on your stew. And still, no one looks at your face like it's a prophecy or a threat. For the first time, you wonder what life would be like if no one ever mentioned your beauty again. What if it never had to mean anything? One day, Isabetta sits beside you while you mend a torn robe. She says, "You know they'll come, don't you?" You look up. She nods toward the trees. The world, the eyes, the questions. They always come. You nod. I know. But now she says you've got tools. She's right. You've got more than that. You've got yourself. And that despite everything isn't a small thing. Here's a strange truth that scholars whisper but rarely write down. Some women simply slipped away, escaped the records, lived and died and healed and taught in the cracks of history. Not saints, not witches, just themselves. Maybe they were never forgotten. Maybe they just never needed to be found. You stay the winter. You help dig channels through the frozen ground. You scrape moss from the stones. You teach the bees to trust you. You don't wear ash on your cheeks anymore. You don't hide your eyes. And still, no one curses. No one burns. No one breaks. In the spring, a young girl arrives, trembling and silent, her eyes full of something you know all too well. You take her hand. You lead her inside. And for the first time, you are the one who doesn't ask questions. Because you've already lived the answers. Spring turns to summer, with a sudden burst of green and bees, a kind of music after months of silence. Flowers bloom in the stone cracks, and the garden grows thick with mint leek and wild violet. You tend it with gentle hands and a practiced rhythm, and the plants respond like they remember you. The young girl, her name is Lena, starts to smile. She's quiet, still often watching you with wide eyes, like she expects you to vanish. But slowly, she mimics the way you tuck herbs into your apron, the way you lift stones to find earthworms, the way you say thank you to bees, even when they sting you. You realize she's becoming something new, just like you did. One night, she asks if you were ever afraid. You don't answer right away. Then you say, I still am. She nods like she expected that. You don't tell her the whole story. You don't need to. She's seen enough to understand that sometimes silence is a kind of armor. Isabella watches all this and says nothing, but you catch her smiling once in that way older women do when they see seeds take root. The monastery becomes your home, or rather, your place a word more solid, less dangerous, a space that holds you without making demands, where beauty isn't currency or curse, just another part of you like the calluses on your palms or the scar behind your ear. Then, one day, travelers arrive, a band of them merchants, likely seeking rest and clean water. Among them is a man with gold-threaded sleeves and a voice like polished wine. He speaks in compliments. When he sees you, he stops. Not the way others have. Not hungry, not cruel, just curious. He asks Isabella who you are. She says no one you need to know. He laughs, then turns to you. Do you sing? You shake your head. Shame, says. You look like someone whose voice could tame a king. Leni frowns. That night, the man lingers by the gate. You find him sitting beneath the almond tree. He says, Forgive me. I only meant to honor you. You sit on the bench beside him. Honor you, repeat. Yes, he says. Beauty deserves it. You ask, What if I'd rather be left than honored? He blinks, then tilts his head. I've never heard it put that way. You nod. He leaves in the morning. And just like that, the world continues. But something in you shifts again, because for once you didn't run, and no one came with torches. One curious fact about medieval records: there are gaps. Names that vanish, women who appear in one ledger and disappear from the next. Some assume they died. Others assume they married or fell ill or fled. But maybe, just maybe, some of them chose that invisibility, not as defeat, but as freedom. Over the next months, you and Lena walk to nearby villages to offer medicine. You bring ointments and honey. You speak gently. You never linger. And when you hear things, rumors of burned barns, of girls shamed for their looks, of women accused of causing storms with a smile, you don't stay silent. You write letters. You teach. You make noise, the soft kind that lingers. And still, people try to name you. The saint, the healer, the girl with the cursed face. But you stop correcting them, because none of them are right, and all of them are wrong. You're not a title. You're not a warning. You're not a story that ends with a fire. You're a woman with a knife in her belt, a balm in her basket, and enough memory to make the world uncomfortable. You're still beautiful. You always will be. But finally, that's not the most interesting thing about you. The wind changes again as autumn returns, brushing yellow across the leaves and sharpening the air with the promise of coming cold. But you're ready for it this time. Your hands are steady, now skilled, trusted, full of purpose. You've become a part of this hidden rhythm, this quiet world beyond the reach of gossip and grasping hands. People come and go through the monastery's outer paths, but they don't linger long. And those who do know better than to ask questions they don't want answered. You and Lena spend your days together gathering boiling, grinding herbs with laughter between your lessons. Her voice has grown stronger. So has her walk. She no longer flinches when someone raises their voice or reaches too quickly. And one day, as you're showing her how to wrap salve for winter sores, she asks, "Did they ever love you? Those who chased you?" You pause. You look down at the green paste staining your fingertips and think of the eyes that watched you, like a flame they could hold in their hand. You remember the gifts, the silences, the so-called protection, the offers that came with barbs. They thought they did. You say at last, but they loved what they wanted me to be, not what I was. Lena doesn't speak for a while. Then she whispers, "I hope no one loves me like that." You smile, "Me too," and you mean it. That night, Isabetta calls you into her small chamber. The fire crackles low. Her hands shake more these days, her hair gone nearly white. She hands you a scroll. It's a record of herbs, treatments, rituals, notes passed from woman to woman, written in careful looping script. "This was mine," she says. "Now it's yours." You try to refuse, but she stops you with a look that ends the conversation. "You've outlived the fire," she says. "That means it's your turn to teach others how not to burn." She passes away that winter, peacefully. No fever, no fear, just quiet. You and Lene bury her beneath the almond tree, and afterward you both sit in the snow hands, clasped, your cloaks tucked tight. You say nothing, but the silence is full of gratitude. Later, as you clean out Isabetta's chamber, you find letters, dozens of them, folded, hidden, unsigned. Some were requests, others were thanks. A few were questions written by girls you'll never meet. Can beauty be a gift if it brings nothing but danger? How do I keep them from seeing me as a mirror? Where can I go where I am not a body first? You stare at the letters for a long time. Then you build a new shelf in the library, a quiet one in the corner where the firelight reaches. You place the scroll there, and the letters. And then, bit by bit, you begin adding your own. Stories, names, descriptions of women who walked the edge of flame and didn't fall in. Women who stitched silence into strength. Women who survived beauty, who reclaimed it, who redefined it. Because history remembers queens and martyrs, but you want to remember the women who were simply there, who didn't want power or punishment, just peace. You and Lene rebuild the bee boxes that spring. The wax smells of sunlight and crushed thyme. A traveler offers to buy a jar. You say no. Some things aren't for sale. Not anymore. You write each day now. Sometimes just a few lines. Sometimes pages. Your handwriting isn't perfect, but the story is. One day, Lene asks if she can write hers. You nod. She begins her page with a single sentence. "They tried to name me, but I chose my own." And you think yes. Let that be the story now, not the girl in the stream, not the bride behind the veil, not the servant with the haunted eyes. Just a woman, whole, unburned, alive. The years pass, as they always do. Not fast, not slow, but with the soft insistence of waves wearing down stone. You begin to forget how long you've been at the monastery. Not because it no longer matters, but because time here is not a threat. There's no one left to chase you now. You wake with the birds warm beneath wool and straw. You greet Lena as she grows into womanhood, taller now, more self-assured than you ever were at her age. She laughs, more easily, speaks her mind. And sometimes, when a stranger arrives with a sick child or a bleeding hand, she's the one who opens the door. You watch her and feel a quiet pride, not ownership, not legacy, just relief. That one girl at least will not carry the weight you did. You still work the herb garden, still kneel in the dirt with mint on your fingertips and sun in your hair. Your hands are stronger, your back aches more, but your heart lighter. One cold morning, you catch sight of yourself in the basin's water. The reflection is soft, blurred by ripples. Your hair is streaked with gray now. Fine lines frame your mouth and eyes, and yet you smile, not to charm, not to survive, just to smile. You no longer dress to vanish. You no longer measure your steps or hide your voice. Your beauty, such as it remains, has softened into something less threatening, or maybe the world simply lost interest. Either way, you're no longer chaste, and in that space, you find peace. One afternoon, a merchant stops by to rest. He shares news from the south. A young girl was burned last month, accused of bewitching a merchant's son with her looks. No trial, no priest would intervene. You feel the old heat stir beneath your ribs. But this time, it doesn't turn to fire, it turns to words. That night, you write again. This time, it's not a warning, or a confession, or a prayer. It's a map. For anyone else like you, you describe where to find the monastery, not by road, but by feeling. You write of almond trees and bee boxes and a library of letters that no one else would ever think to read. And at the bottom, you sign your name, your real one, not the name others gave you or the names you used to hide. Yours. When you lay down to sleep, Lean is already snoring softly in the next room. You close your eyes and think not of fire or fear, or running barefoot through thorns, but of stillness. And for the first time in a long, long life, you dream not of escape, but of belonging. Because in the end, your fate was not in being beautiful. It was in surviving everything that beauty could not protect you from, and making something gentle out of the ruins, something lasting, something like a home. Now the air quiets. The long road behind you fades. The footsteps soften the leaves, no longer rustle with suspicion or pursuit. Only wind. Only stillness. The sky above the old monastery darkens into velvet, and the stars blink awake one by one. You lie back against the straw mattress, the wool blanket rising and falling with your breath. It's slower now. Deeper. The way it gets when your body knows the running is over. You hear the bees in their boxes tucked in for the night. You hear Lena, her voice somewhere in the garden, softly humming as she covers the last of the herbs. There's comfort in that sound, a rhythm. The stories you've written are still there, waiting on the shelf. Pages you once thought would never be told. Letters from women who were never remembered, but now they are. Because of you. You're no longer hiding. You're no longer being chased. You're no longer being defined by your face, your silence, or your past. You're simply here, alive. And in the quiet hum of this gentle night, you let your body soften into the earth beneath you. Let your thoughts drift like petals in a slow stream. There's nothing left to fear now. Only rest. Only peace. Only the deep warm. Knowing that you have come so far and that here, finally, you can stay. You can sleep. Sweet dreams.